Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Industry Chats with Affixify. I am Jasmine Saliga, the founder of Affixify, and I am so excited to have my friend Christine Malfair on with me this afternoon. Hey, Christine.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jasmine. This is going to be a great chat.
I know, I'm so excited because you and I have talked many times over the last few months and gotten to know each other both professionally and personally. And I'm like, this is super fun when those worlds, intersect and I get to have you here on the show. So, Christine, tell us a little bit about you for those listening. I feel like most people know you because you have this LinkedIn presence and, such an expertise, but tell our viewers a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think you and I first connected. I first heard you on a podcast, and then I think we connected because I had seen that you were in Texas and I grew up in Katy, but now we are nowhere near each other anymore. So I live in Western Canada in the beautiful Canadian Rockies. I was a former hotel manager. So I think that brings a little bit of a unique lens to the conversation that we're going to have today as well. And since my time as GM, I transitioned over into helping independent hoteliers with their marketing because I found that I was in a little state of overwhelm, not having a full-time marketing team or at least, a big bench. And it was a challenge. So I started helping hoteliers with their marketing, and that started out with a fully done for you service. And now I'm helping in the consulting realm, working with marketing teams.
Yeah.
So it's really, my expertise is about optimization and driving past those revenue plateaus that hotels may be having.
Well, and it's such a topic. I notice like when you post, there's so much interest in what you're saying because you're clearly hitting the nail on the head and you're hitting kind of a pain point in our industry. What makes what you're doing unique as well is that you've walked in the shoes of these hoteliers before you're doing, the consulting side of it. And I think that's why today's conversation is so helpful is anytime we can bring to the table someone who has walked both sides of that journey, it's just so powerful because you can really resonate. And so I'm excited to jump in. And when you shared your topic, so for those listening, our guests actually choose the topic based on their expertise. And I thought this is going to be really fun for me to learn because I'm so big into helping hotels find tech, but from the consultant's perspective, I'm excited. So tell me a little bit about the guest journey, technology, how the consultant plays a role, and specifically like when you come into a project, what are you doing to guide guide hotel companies, I guess, into purchasing tech, and how does that look?
Yeah, I think there's a number of different facets for sure. I am very big, obviously, marketing. The customer journey is central to marketing. And I find that the first shift the first sort of conversation or the groundwork that needs to be laid, I should say, is that the guest experience doesn't start when the guest arrives at your property. And that's one thing that I really, I think from my operations side, I am very much acutely aware of that fact where, you're trying to, like from the hotel side of things, you're trying to engage this multi-sensory experience in hotels. We've walked into those hotels where they have a particular scent that's on brand and there's music that's being played and there's this multi-sensory thing that's going on. And we often leave digital to be like, the online experience that people have is left to, mostly the visual representation and selecting more based on a checklist, kind of like, have we presented this particular room type? Have we shown a photo of the hotel so they know what it looks like when they drive up? I mean, it sounds very base, but we do see a lot of, that experience where the digital, where the online experience is really, left to not really come fully alive. And so I like to say the guest experience doesn't start when they arrive at your hotel, it starts before. And that starts online. So then with that in mind, when you're thinking about the guest journey, you want to map that emotional journey, not just compartmentalize it, whether it's digital or whether it's in person, but it is a fully emotional journey, and we buy and experience things through our emotions. So I have a phrase that I like to use. It's called obsess about the guest, because it was one that was so central to the work that I did, but like putting the guest in the middle of it all. And I think that, where tech selections are concerned, when you're thinking about the customer journey and you're mapping out, we'll often look at it like I know a lot of marketing looks at it like, do we have a website? Check. Do we have, the booking engine? Check. Do we have an email system that will send them their confirmations? Check. And so, and the property management systems and all these things. But when we actually lay it out and look at it in terms of how are people experiencing this on an emotional level, and is it consistent with our brand? And I know that you just had Omar on here talking about brand. And so I really, I echo what he said in terms of that, people, you want to make sure that nobody wants friction in any of their experiences. Yeah. But if you're going to say that your brand promise is relaxation and luxury, like every single touch point. Yeah. And it needs to be that, and little blips are kind of like little cuts along that trust line of, do I believe this promise? This is what I'm actually buying. This is the relaxation piece. And so anyways, when we have friction in tech, it's super important to get those things nailed from a customer journey side of things. So that's one way I often look at things without going too granular. But I find like having these conversations is really important. It depends how deep you want to go, but even just having an awareness and an acknowledgement of that, I think is super important in the tech selection piece. And then from the guest journey, one thing I do in marketing, how I work with hotels in terms of how are we spending dollars and time in the whole part of the guest journey. We can take the same essential concept, which I use a framework called IDEAL. So it's inspiration, discovery, evaluation. So they're going from inspiration into discovering you online, into evaluation. So maybe they're checking your social media, they're over on TripAdvisor or into Google reviews, and then they're into action. So they're into the booking system, and then loyalty. And do you have something that's accomplishing or helping you facilitate each of those phases? And how much dollar and time are you putting into those pieces? So you can say that from a marketing standpoint, but you can also look at it from a tech standpoint as well. And I think that really helps map the customer journey.
That's brilliant. I'm actually sitting here thinking like, oh, you might have to do some kind of ebook or something on your IDEAL methodology, because that is so smart. And so if I were a hotel and I were coming to you, and I think there may be a lag on my connection for those watching, I apologize. I'm not sure. But if I were to come to you and say, Christine, I need to figure this out. I need to figure out the revenue plateau, the journey. Do you take a tech first approach, or do you take a kind of what Omar said is let's look at your story and what you're looking to achieve? Obviously you go through that IDEAL process. Like, where do you start? And then when does tech come into that? And I mean, I know there's so much, right? Like we call it the tech puzzle. When do you start piecing together that puzzle? Is that secondary, or is that the first thing you do? I'm super curious of your process.
Yeah. And the first thing that comes to mind is sort of, how is it typically done? Yeah. Right. And I remember being in the GM seat, because you don't have a lot of time. You maybe have, talked to your owner about, we need to do this. We need to solve for a CRM, or we need to solve for this other thing. And so you end up putting it on a to-do list. It becomes a task because you need it. And then you're like, okay, I know the phase is like demo, then make a recommendation, and then we'll, jump in. Right. And all that to say is like, it's very condensed. the process is very condensed. And I'm sure that's what you've experienced in talking with a lot of hoteliers. You know, it's like, I don't have a lot of time to do all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And so when I start in a conversation around, let's map the customer journey, you're like, oh, I have no time for this, right? Like, or why do we have to do this? Or this sounds super painful. You know, it's like, so I think that there's a little bit of understanding and bringing up sort of, here's some of the risks. Here's the things, you know, the things that you might step in down the road or considerations to be made. This is why we do it. And that's, I think, where consultants can say, I will take that work off your plate. Let's do it.
Right.
And then I'll come back and we'll just do a little highlight. We'll just touch on the milestones along this process instead of them, you know, what hotel you're. I don't know many. I know they're out there, but I don't know many who are going to sit down and actually map an entire customer journey and figure out how does tech support that. And I guess that, to answer your question, it's like we start there. We start with a gap analysis, that ideal journey. So it's like, where don't we have the pieces that are supporting us? Or where are we doing something over and over and over again that could be maybe automated or integrated with another piece of software that would really help us, you know?
Yeah. Well, and your timing is so interesting because, as you know, we are looking at adding consultants to Affixify for this purpose, because in my conversations, I'm like, so often I tell people, you need a consultant between you and Affixify, you know, before a lot of these hoteliers even know what to go search, they need someone to help them in that middle ground process. And so, I mean, over and over, I'm hearing, well, we know we need to fix this problem, but we're not sure which technology would do that. And I'm like, oh, I know a consultant for that. Or, oh, we should call Christine. And so it just makes sense to have you guys in the process to come in. You've walked in their shoes, take that load. And I think too, we hear that a lot of hoteliers either rush decisions because they don't have time for technology vetting, and then they have regrets, or they just stick with what they've always had because of the time. So what you're saying really resonates. What do you think of that? I mean, do you find that as well? They just rush that decision if they don't have someone like you to come in and help?
Oh, I've rushed that decision. I've been that GM, you know? And I mean, like, yes, and tech is one thing, but it's also like, you know, just having somebody to give it a little bit of space and time, and to maybe take the heavy lifting out of it, I think is one of the biggest things. Because I've been the GM that stepped in it. It's like, oh, that we thought we were getting this.
Yeah.
Right. But actually we have this, and now we need to work with that. And then I have to go back and say, I'm sorry, hotel owner. You know, I made a mistake, and it's a costly one. It's never like, so we, you know, there's this tension that exists with, you know, now my team has to adopt all this, and we thought it was going to accomplish this. But anyways, so I think it is it's totally worth taking the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you talked about risk, and what I'm hearing is, I mean, there's a financial risk. I think vendors listening will resonate kind of hearing that, is that your buyers are taking a risk anytime they sign. You might have the best platform in the world, but if it's not the best platform for them in the long run, they're not the ones having to go to the owner and say, I made a mistake. Like, even hearing you say that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel the weight of that. So hiring a consultant, and we've talked a little bit about, even when we planned out the conversation today, how you can come in and mitigate that risk. Is that the key risk that you see being assisted? I mean, like, avoiding is if you bring someone like you in, or what else can consultants do to help mitigate the risk factors of tech within the hotel and that adoption process?
Yeah. What comes to mind is, I think that there's 2 consultants that are needed, depending on the piece of technology.
Right.
I think from, you know, a guest journey piece, it would be very valuable to bring in a marketing consultant, like myself. But then when you're looking at other parts of it, an IT consultant, which I work with in one of the hotel groups that I work with, she brings a really valuable perspective in terms of how contracts are written. This is outside of my area of expertise. So she understands the more technical verbiage, like I understand the need for kind of open AIs and open APIs rather, and more flexibility, but she really understands like all those implications, right? And so I think that it's that having consultants look at least what you're doing, what you're thinking of acquiring, and even on really small projects, just to have that second opinion where there's just somebody from the outside saying, hey, this is worth taking a bit of time. We don't want to, as I say, step in it. But I think that is probably the biggest risk is like making the wrong selection. Yeah. So I think there's also like, there's the risk that you're going to maybe choose the wrong thing, but there's also the risk that it's not going to play nice with other pieces of tech that you have. So I'm quite involved with any piece of tech that touches the customer journey. I'm involved with that. And because of that, I think there's a way to say like, we've got to look at all of these things and how they play well together. And going from one system to another, is there continuity in the customer journey there? Like going from one to another, what's the look, what's the feel, what's the, speed, all of those things. So.
Yeah. I mean, technology has such an impact and we know this, but I think talking to you and talking to Omar lately, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so intertwined with our guest that sometimes we think we know it impacts our staff, but when you really think about the tech piece and how it could impact your guest, I think that's what should light the fire to like make sure this is done correctly and chosen correctly and implemented correctly, because it is just such a huge risk if it is not. And last question for you is like, so when it comes to those tech evaluations, so you come in, I know you touch, anything that touches the guest journey, or maybe your counterpart that does the other operational systems. What would be like the key factors you would tell someone to address? So let's say someone listening didn't call you, but they were kind of curious, like, oh, I heard Christine, and what would she say I should do? I'm looking for a new CRM or booking engine. What are those key areas that a hotelier should consider?
I think one of the first one that bubbles to mind is, have we squeezed the juice from the tool we currently have?
Yeah.
So do we fully understand it? When was the last time we had a system update? When was the last time we had, like, I've worked with property management systems that do updates, but then they don't tell anybody they've done updates. And so you have to actually subscribe to the update. So you actually have to call them and say, can we do this? And they're like, oh yeah, we did that update like 18 months ago. You didn't get it. And so it's really just looking at like, have we called instead of just throwing it out? Have we called? Do we have a touch point with the company to make the update and to see if we're, all the questions that we have on this growing list can actually be satisfied by a tool we already have.
Brilliant. I tell people that too. I say you first need to look at what you've already invested in. That's your low hanging fruit. And then, so let's say they've done that and then they still need new tech. Like what would you advise from there if this were your client?
Yeah. I would think about the hidden costs, like the time, the training. In our businesses, we think a little bit about objections. What are the objections? What are we going to hear from the staff? If we take it to them, instead of making this decision around a boardroom or between a GM and an owner, if we're looking at it and saying, let's just let's get everybody's buy-in. So they're a part of this decision as opposed to imposed upon them. I think that would be really helpful. That's sort of my old GM's hat on there. I'm sure you've talked a lot about adoption success, but, including people in the process, bringing somebody into a demo, How can we best be ready would be another consideration. So like bringing full visibility to the rollout. So here's the anticipated time we're going to do this. Here's all the training that we're going to offer, because we know that, well, I believe that success is in the training.
Yeah. Very much so.
Because what you want to avoid is like lack of adoption, but then abandonment, right? And maybe we were talking about this before, but there were some mental health stats in the hotel industry, and tech was, I saw it. If I find it, I will send it to you, because there were some mental health stats in the hotel industry around, one of the biggest was around use of technology. And sort of the staff are left sort of languishing in trying to figure things out. And you don't have to go too far on Reddit to find out what
this is true.
hotel staff are saying, you know. And it's funny to me because when you talk to people, they remember the property management systems that they have used through their career.
It's so true. Actually, you're saying that, and I'm like, yes.
For good reasons and for bad.
This is so true. Oh my gosh. Well, and I've done the Reddit thing as far as just kind of, we had a lead come from Reddit. Someone mentioned us on a Reddit thread. So I'm like, well, let me go take a look at this. And sure enough, you know, I discovered all kinds of things about, it's like a therapy session, you know, for hoteliers trying to figure out technology. And we've had a really good comment here. So internal buying pays off in the long term. Unfortunately, people always want short-term results. So what do you think of this? I mean, I think this just totally backs what you just said. Is in order to have that long-term adoption, you got to go to your team. You have to make sure they're a part.
Yeah. And then really like let everybody know, like not just like take them right back to the beginning and say, we had like this concern. We're trying to solve for this. This is a solution that this is what we're trying to do. And this and why, right? It's people can get behind your why.
Yes. That's a brilliant idea. I think for any business, like make sure the team understands the problem being solved, and you're not just throwing this new platform at them without, you know, a full when they might be thinking, well, the other PMS worked just fine. So that's really great advice too.
Yes. And then also like when you say this other PMS worked fine, it triggers a response. So the accounting might say that, but your front desk team doesn't. Right. And then your salesperson is like, it doesn't work for me with groups, you know? So it's really looking at a lot of those things, but if looking at tech, I would be looking at lock-in situations. Technology is changing so fast, and there are so many other providers beyond the big names. And I know we've talked about this a little bit, but like lesser known vendors or boutique vendors, just don't overlook them and think about like, is everything going to play nice? So a lot of that sort of avoiding the lock-in situations where there's no flexibility, I think would be a key one too, especially for those hoteliers that maybe don't have an IT department. Yeah.
That's one of our passions, and really one of the top reasons we existed in day one. I mean, now we've grown into like, we have a lot of different vendors, which is wonderful. But my heart was kind of at the beginning, like, there's so many great tech companies that don't have the marketing budget. So they're not necessarily in your face all the time, but they actually have this really cool, awesome, helpful technology. So I agree with what you're saying, is maybe do research beyond just the top 3 names you see every day and look deeper into what else is out there that could really help. And usually those smaller companies really want to partner, and they really want to help you because they are trying to build their visibility, you know, so you might find a really great partner in some of those lesser known tech vendors.
Right. And they're also at a stage where they're more nimble. So they can take their customer feedback and really want to action it. So
it's brilliant.
I think one thing that also, sorry?
No, go ahead. Yeah, I want to hear.
One thing that also comes to mind is like, just again, my GM brain is like that ROI. So
Yeah.
everybody is like, thinks of return as dollars. And if we look at it in terms of efficiency gained or time saved, that's all returns. That's all, I mean, eventually equates to dollars down the long line. But looking at what goal is this particular piece of technology going to
Right.
achieve, and line it up behind your strategy, as opposed to
Yeah.
just a gap. Like,
Yeah.
this tool is going to get us better guest satisfaction. This tool is going to get us better, booking conversions or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so smart. You have so much to share. And I always feel this way when we talk. Like, I learn so much, and then I'm thinking everyone needs to hear what Christine does, because you take such a holistic approach and you do it with such, humility, even though you know so much. So I can't wait. I think maybe we even need to do a part 2 of this sometime. But what we will do too, for those listening, is this conversation will also go into a recap article on our website. That way, for those that missed it, you can watch on YouTube and, of course, read this, or if you want to share with a friend. But Christine, for those listening, where can they contact you? What is the best place? And then we'll include that information in the comments as well.
Yeah, I think the best place is LinkedIn. Yeah. Christine Malfair, just as the name says there on the screen. And then from there, you can head over to my website. And I'm starting a new revenue strategy room, which will be free for hoteliers. So that's
okay.
new. That's like less than 24 hours new.
Oh my gosh. Well, we should mention that in the Affixify newsletter for you too, and get that out there. So we'll talk about that.
That would be great.
Thank you for joining me. And again, just such an honor. Again, we'll have Christine's information in the comments. This will be available on YouTube later and on our website. And Christine, just thank you so much. It was such a joy.
Thank
and
you.
we will be back next week.
Thank you. You're doing so such great things. I wish there was an Affixify when I was a GM.
I really, not even just making this up, we hear this all the time. People are like, where was this? And that's where I'm like, I wish we were here 2 years ago. I had a guy tell me, he has a couple Disney properties, and he said, where were you 2 years ago when I was going through a new PMS, search? And I was like, well, this is affirming. So
you're doing great things. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll be back next week with our friends from Rico Procurement Platform, and we will talk very soon.